So, Sophia, you've done a lot of research into reserves. Can you tell us what are some of the reasons that countries have, or international at the international level, have started reserves?
I think reserves at the basic level are an obvious idea. You know, anytime you're producing food, you want to keep a surplus by for the months where there won't be anything fresh to harvest. And a more profound way, countries looking at their food distribution system will see both that there are areas where there are more food and areas where there are less, and they might want to be able to even that out. And also we'll see that prices tend to be very volatile, that agricultural supply is not a surefire thing. You depend above all on the weather. And as we know, weather is less and less predictable in our time. So I think the idea has an immediate intuitive appeal, and for thousands of years governments have experimented with different kinds of food reserves. At,
Okay. And what are some of the pitfalls that you've seen in the way that reserves have been run?
I think the biggest problem reserves face is that, like any kind of a bank or insurance program, it's an asset, and it's very tempting to pillage that asset for other reasons than the reserve was intended. So just like the bank has to defend itself like Fort Knox, you have to think of ways in which you can operate the reserve where it's not easy to either steal the food or to use the food for other purposes, because if you have food, you have power in most political contexts. And so the long history of reserves and a lot of the problems people have faced trying to manage a good reserve are those kinds of issues. You need to have very strong governance mechanisms in place. You need an arm's length relationship with the political party of the day. You need checks and balances to make sure that it can operate. It's also hard to get it right. You're effectively setting up a reserve. You're saying that the market alone isn't going to be able to manage the food distribution that you want. You don't want to rely just on purchasing power. You don't want to just rely on a private exchange between a supplier and a consumer. And so you intervene because the market doesn't manage all of the things it needs to manage, but as soon as you intervene, you're subject to human fallibility. And so you need to have a very good system of information. You need ways in which to cross-check the information and to learn from experience as you go. And you probably need to be coordinating with other countries, because very few countries have an entirely autonomous food system. Most countries are importing and exporting a certain amount of food, and for many of the poorest countries, they're importing a lot of food. And so they're going to need to look at the regional context, how much food is there in the region, and for many of them, they're going to have to look at global markets as well. And to manage your reserve with so many different, with so many other actors involved, it's a difficult thing.
Well, looking forward, and as we're facing this hunger crisis right now, what role do you see reserves playing?
Well, I think that, and this is part of our discussions here in Washington, that it's clear that reserves are a tool. They're one tool, not just of a series of options, but actually they imply certain other things about what we need to do, including managing supply, thinking about what land is in production, and how much production overall is a good thing for the system. So I think and we also have a broader context of a food crisis where we need to see the right kind of investment in increasing production of local food in many, many parts of the world. So if we situate reserves in that context, I think we have a powerful tool to make a difference, managing volatility in particular, managing speculation, which has been allowed to go unregulated for the last decade or so and has caused a lot of damage, a lot of hunger, quite directly linked to speculation. So the reserves are one piece of an answer, I think, to a broader crisis in the food system, and have, the governments have shown some interest, so we're hoping we can build on that.
Thanks very much.